English teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing story/assessment a student has ever submitted? I had a junior write a memoir in her daily journal about getting raped by 2 other students. This was 7 years ago and I still get emotional when I think about it. She was always super quiet and a great student. She wasn't aware that the journals would be turned in and she begged me not to say anything to her parents. I spent a lot of time making sure she got the help she needed. She's doing much better now. She's an RN in a local hospital and she took care of me a year or so ago when I was in the ER. I have my HS students write a defining moment memoir about a moment where their lives changed in a significant way. I generally see some stories about childhood abuse and things of that nature where I make sure our social work team is aware of their claims, they're getting support, and that's basically it. However, I did once get a story about the first time a girl in my class had smoked marijuana. Except, the whole thing was written with the weed anthropomorphized as a beautiful woman named Mary that she met and took on a beautiful all-night date. This thing was about 3 pages long and graphic. We're talking full anatomical descriptions of lesbian sex as an analogy for the experience of getting high for the first time. It just kept going and going, and it was extremely well written to the point that I was really uncomfortable reading it and had to put it away. The worst part is she was so excited for me to read it and came in the next day like, "Did you read it? Did you like it? I'm super proud." And I had to basically say, "Yay, it's super well written, but honestly I just can't be reading something like that written by one of my students." Maybe not exactly what you were looking for, but I'm an ESL teacher. One class, we were talking about different holidays and how we celebrate them. This one student was trying to explain Mother's Day, but didn't know the exact name of it. When I asked him to explain the holiday so I could tell him the name we use, he said, "It's the day where I pleasure my mother." Similar experience here, helping a Japanese friend in college write a creative paper for her ESL class. The assignment was to write a description of a common piece of Earth technology from the perspective of an alien who'd never seen it before. She chose a telephone, and set up a situation where the alien was watching a human man talking to his girlfriend. But the alien misunderstood and thought the girlfriend lived physically inside this little weird-shaped box. Her alien asked, how could he be in love with someone in a box? Only my friend got the English wrong. She ended up asking, how could he make love with someone in a box? That was an awkward conversation when I told her what she'd said. Students were annotating old news articles about a very famous axe murderer from the late 1800s. One student includes an annotation about how the article reminded her of her father. She helpfully included his name for me to Google, and yep, that is how I found out my student's dad is literally an axe murderer. Second place goes to a student who wrote from the POV of the Zodiac Killer for a creative writing assignment. It was incredibly well written. If it hadn't been, it honestly might have not been so disturbing. But being in the killer's head as he ties up and stabs young couples to death? No thanks. Oh, and last week someone submitted a horror story in creative writing. I swear to God, she could be a writer for Saw movies. The deaths were graphic and gruesome and creative. I had to take breaks while reading it because I'm pretty squeamish. Not an English teacher, but when I was in junior college I was a TA for a psych instructor and I read and graded essays. There was an assignment for students to create an experiment where they trained themselves to create a habit by rewarding themselves after the task. Think Pavlov. One male student wrote about his experiment. He chose to train himself to masturbate more often and his reward was masturbating. And he wrote about it in detail. Very sustainable system, but so weird to submit to your instructor. I teach, but not English. I once had to write up a middle school student. I don't remember for what, but it was serious since I hate writing up, and they turned in their assignment for that day with none of it done. In its place was a half-page description of all the things their dad would do to them if he found out they were written up again. It started pretty mild, say, take the phone away, to more serious things like no food or water. By the time I saw it, they were already out the door, so I hopped over to the counselor and let them have a copy of it. Not sure what happened after that since it was out of my hands, and I'm not sure if it was even true or not. They tended to be overdramatic and stretch the truth in class, but I took it very seriously. I've definitely been more purposeful and welcoming in my interactions with them from here on out. Got to make sure that the classroom is a safe and good place for them. Abuse, and more abuse. Assigning anything that asks them to reflect on something personal or write something creative has a high chance of yielding stories about abuse. Those stories very likely reflect real experiences. Many a visit are paid to the guidance counselors and school therapists. If you don't work with kids, you might be shocked to learn just how many people are abused in some fashion. If you add in how many kids aren't abused but just have a bad upbringing, it gets really depressing. I was working with a small group of Year 7 students, and we did this exercise where the kids had to create a story using a randomly assigned setting, character and theme. So this one boy ends up with a war zone, a princess and unrequited love. He proceeded to turn these innocuous prompts into a hilariously messed up story. Set during World War II, it's told from the perspective of the princess of the UK, who wakes up on a battlefield to find Nazis shooting her. Suddenly someone behind her kills her attackers. She turns around to see her rescuer, and it's Hitler. In fear, she runs into a medical tent, Hitler in close pursuit. In the tent, she decides to confront Hitler, but, upon locking eyes with him, realizes he's the most beautiful man she's ever seen, falling in love immediately. Hitler, however, walks right past her and kisses a passing nurse. Furious and jealous, the princess of the UK kills the nurse in a fit of rage, then flees the medical tent, returning to the battlefield before the sad and baffling conclusion to the story, and then I died. So not disturbing as such, but certainly unexpected. Not a teacher, but when I was in primary school we had a student read out a story about killing her whole family and then herself. Like a week later her sister went missing and they still haven't found her. It's been years but it still haunts me to this day.